Picture this. I'm standing on a stage, the kind where the lights are so bright they could burn through your doubts, where the roar of the crowd feels like a rocket engine firing at full thrust. The world is watching, hanging on to every word, every gesture, every promise of a future that seems to defy gravity itself. We've just launched a rocket that kissed the edge of space and came back to Earth, landing upright on a platform, bobbing in the middle of the ocean, a feat that made the impossible look like a Tuesday afternoon. Or maybe it's the day we rolled out a new electric car, one that goes from 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds, silencing the skeptics with every hum of its motor. The headlines scream victory, the internet explodes with memes, hot takes, and worshipful threads. Billions of dollars in market value shift overnight. The world calls it a triumph, a milestone, a revolution, and there I am at the center of it all, smiling for the cameras, shaking hands, raising a glass to the team that made it happen. It's the kind of moment that should feel like standing on top of the universe, like you've cracked the code to bending reality to your will. But then the lights dim, the crowd disperses, the cameras pack up and move on to the next story. The champagne glasses sit empty, and the echo of applause fades into a silence, so heavy it feels like it's pressing down on your chest. You're left standing there, alone, with nothing but the hum of your own thoughts, and a question that cuts deeper than any critic's jab or investor's doubt. What does all of this mean if there's no one to share it with? That's where I found myself, not on a stage, not in a boardroom, not in the glow of a successful launch, but in a quiet room, staring at the walls, hearing my own heartbeat like it's the only sound left in the world. And let me tell you, that silence is louder than any rocket engine I've ever built. I've spent my life chasing dreams that most people called insane, rockets that can land themselves, cars that run on batteries and outperform gas guzzlers, a network of satellites blanketing the planet with internet. These were the kinds of ideas that made people laugh, roll their eyes, or bet against me. And I thrived on proving them wrong. Every doubter, every skeptic, every that's impossible was fuel for the fire. I'd stay up for days, fueled by coffee and sheer stubbornness, crunching numbers, tweaking designs, pushing teams to build what no one else dared to dream. The noise of it all, the hum of factories, the chatter of engineers, the roar of a Falcon rocket defying gravity, it was my oxygen. It was proof I was alive, proof I was making a dent in the universe. I measured my worth in payloads delivered in miles per hour, in terabytes of data beamed from orbit. The world watched, and I fed off that energy, that validation, that sense that I was rewriting the rules of what's possible. But here's the thing, no one tells you when you're building empires or launching rockets. The higher you climb, the quieter it gets at the top. When the noise fades, when the cheering stops, you're left with yourself. And no amount of headlines, no number of followers, no stock price ticking upward can fill the void that opens up when you realize you're standing alone. It's not something you can engineer your way out of. You can't design a circuit board to fix a hollow heart. You can't write a line of code to make the silence feel less suffocating. I learned that the hard way in moments when I should have been celebrating, but instead felt like I was carrying a weight heavier than any payload I'd ever sent to orbit. Let me take you back to one of those nights. We just pulled off something the world said couldn't be done. Maybe it was landing a rocket on a drone ship in the Atlantic, waves crashing against the platform as it stood steady, defying every odds maker who bet we'd fail. Or maybe it was hitting a production milestone at Tesla, churning out thousands of cars in a week when everyone said we'd go bankrupt trying. The team was electric, high-fiving, popping bottles, riding the high of a victory that felt like it could change the course of history. I stood there, grinning, nodding, playing the part of the visionary the world expected me to be. But later, when the celebration died down, when the factory lights dimmed and the team went home, I walked into my house and closed the door, and it hit me, the silence. It wasn't just quiet, it was deafening. It was the kind of silence that makes you question everything you've built, everything you've sacrificed, everything you thought defined you. I've stared down bankruptcy. I've walked through factories where machines were grinding to a halt because we couldn't pay the bills. I've faced critics who wrote my obituary before I'd even had a chance to prove them wrong. Those battles were brutal, but they were fights. I knew how to win. I could run the numbers, adjust the variables, build a better prototype, and keep pushing forward. But this was different. This wasn't a problem I could solve with a spreadsheet or a late night coding session. This was a question that lingered in the air, heavy and unyielding. What's the point of conquering the stars if you come home to an empty house? What's the point of revolutionizing industries if there's no one to share the victories with? No one to sit across from you at the dinner table and remind you why it all matters? I'm not saying this to sound dramatic or to fish for sympathy. I'm saying it because it's the truth. And I know I'm not the only one who's felt it. You sitting there listening to this, maybe you've had your own moments of silence, moments when the world's applause wasn't enough to drown out the ache inside. Maybe you've built something incredible, a career, a family, a dream, and still found yourself wondering, is this it? That's the human condition, isn't it? We're wired to create, to push, to reach for the stars, but we're also wired to connect, to love, to share our lives with someone who sees us not just for what we do, but for who we are. And when that piece is missing, no amount of success can fill the gap. For years, I thought I could outrun that truth. I thought if I worked harder, built faster, achieved more, the emptiness would take care of itself. I told myself that the next launch, the next milestone, the next billion-dollar valuation would be the thing that made me feel whole. But it doesn't work that way. You can't engineer your way out of loneliness. You can't design a rocket powerful enough to escape the pull of a heart that's yearning for connection. I've built engines that can break free of Earth's gravity, but I couldn't build a bridge across the distance between me and the kind of life that feels complete. And here's where it gets real. I'm a guy who's spent his life trusting logic, worshiping at the altar of data and equations. When SpaceX was on the brink of collapse, I didn't panic, I ran the numbers. When Tesla was burning cash faster than we could raise it, I didn't flinch. I mapped out the contingencies. Logic was my compass, my North Star, my safe harbor. If I could calculate the variables, I could bend the outcome. That's how you build a rocket that survives reentry. That's how you create a car that rewrites the rules of the road. That's how you wire the planet with beams of internet from the sky. But love doesn't care about your calculations. Love doesn't give a damn about your thrust to weight ratios or your battery energy density. Love is the one variable I couldn't solve for, the one equation I couldn't balance. That realization hit me like a meteor. I was standing in the middle of my own life, surrounded by achievements that should have made me feel invincible. But instead, I fed small, not because I lacked money or influence, God knows I had plenty of both, but because I lacked something far more important, someone to share it with, someone who could look at me not as the guy on the magazine covers, not as the name in the headlines, but as a man who laughs, who doubts, who dreams, who fails, someone who could make the silence feel like home instead of a void. So, ladies, let me speak to you directly. You know, this feeling, don't you? You've carried the weight of expectations, whether it's building a career, raising a family, or holding together the pieces of a life that sometimes feels like it's pulling in a million directions. You've stood in your own moments of silence, wondering if the world sees you for who you really are, or if they're just dazzled by what you've accomplished. You've poured your heart into things that matter, only to find that the applause fades, and what's left is a question: who's there when the lights go out? Who sees you? Not just for what you do, but for the fire in your soul, the strength in your heart, the dreams you carry even when no one's watching. I'm here to tell you that you are not just a supporting character in someone else's story. You are the co-author of destiny itself. The world might try to measure you by your titles, your achievements, your ability to keep everything together, but your real power lies in something deeper. It's in your ability to see people, to connect, to transform a moment of silence into a moment of meaning. You have the strength to make someone feel whole, not because you complete them, but because you challenge them to be more, to dream bigger, to love harder. And that's what this journey is about, not just my journey, but yours. To Because the truth is, the greatest mission I've ever taken on didn't start with a rocket launch or a factory floor. It started with a prayer, a hope, a desperate wish for a partner who could make the impossible feel possible, not just in the stars, but right here in the quiet of my own heart. That prayer wasn't for a perfect woman, because perfection is a myth, a design flaw in the human condition. It was for someone real, someone who could stand beside me, not behind me, someone who could look at the chaos of my life and say, this is ours, not just yours. Someone who could take the silence and turn it into a symphony. And let me tell you, that kind of partnership, that kind of love is worth more than every rocket I've ever launched, every car I've ever built, every satellite I've ever sent into orbit, because without it, all those things are just noise impressive, I'm sure, but empty when the spotlight fades. So here's the question I want you to carry with you. What's your mission? Not the one the world expects you to chase, not the one defined by titles or trophies, but the one that lives in your heart, the one that whispers to you in the quiet moments when the noise of the world fades away. Because I believe that every one of you has the power to change a life, not just by what you do, but by who you are. You are the architects of connection, the engineers of hope, the dreamers who make the impossible feel within reach. And as I stand here telling you about the moment I realized my greatest mission wasn't out there in the stars, but right here in the human heart, I want you to know that your mission matters to your love, your strength, in your courage. They are the forces that will redefine the future, not just for you, but for everyone you touch. This is just the beginning. My story doesn't end in that silence, it starts there. And as we move forward, I'm going to take you through the journey of how I learned that logic, for all its power, couldn't solve the puzzle of love, how I had to let go of control, embrace faith, and discover that the greatest gift I could ever hope for wasn't a $1 billion company or a ticket to Mars. It was a woman who saw me, challenged me, and made every victory, every failure, every moment mean something more. So stick with me, because this isn't just my story. It's a call to every one of you to recognize the power you hold, the legacy you're building, and the love that will outlast us all. Let's dive into the heart of it. I've spent my life wiring my brain to think like a machine, sharp, precise, relentless. Equations were my language, data my currency, logic my shield. When the world threw problems at me, I didn't blink. I broke them down, piece by piece. like dismantling a rocket engine to find the one bolt that's out of spec. SpaceX was teetering on the edge of oblivion. I ran the numbers, slashed costs, begged for loans, and kept the dream alive. Tesla was bleeding cash faster than a booster burns fuel. I crunched the projections, redesigned the supply chain, and pushed the team to build cars when the bank account was screaming surrender. Critics said I was done, that my ideas were a pipe dream. I let their words bounce off me, fueled by the certainty that if I could solve for X, I could bend reality to my will. That's how you launch a rocket that defies gravity. That's how you build a car that laughs in the face of fossil fuels. That's how you string a constellation of satellites across the sky to beam internet to every corner of the globe. Logic was my rocket fuel. And I was the pilot, steering through storms with a calculator in one hand and a blueprint in the other. But then I ran into a problem that didn't care about my spreadsheets or my late night coding marathons. Love. It's not a variable you can isolate. It's not a system you can optimize. It's not a trajectory you can plot with a slide rule and a cup of coffee. I tried, though, God, did I try? I approached it the way I approached everything else, like a puzzle to be solved. I thought if I could just find the right algorithm, the right set of inputs, I could engineer a connection that felt real, that felt like home. I told myself, this is just another challenge. Break it down, analyze the failure modes, design a better system. But love, it laughed at my logic. It tore up my flow charts and tossed them into the wind. It looked at my carefully calculated plans and said, nice try, but you're playing the wrong game. Uh, Let me paint you a picture. Imagine me sitting in a room littered with papers, sketches of rocket nozzles, production schedules for battery cells, emails from investors demanding answers. It's 3 in the morning, the kind of hour where the world feels like it's holding its breath. I'm staring at a laptop screen, trying to debug a problem that's costing us millions. My brain is firing on all cylinders, solving for thrust, for efficiency, for survival. And yet, in the back of my mind, there's this other problem, one I can't quantify. It's the ache of waking up alone, of eating dinner alone, of knowing that no matter how many zeros are in my bank account, no one's there to share the weight of the day. I tried to push it aside, to bury it under work, to drown it out with the hum of factories and the buzz of deadlines. But it was there like a low frequency hum. You can't ignore a signal that no amount of engineering could silence. I'm a guy who built his life on control. Every rocket I've launched, every car I've designed, every satellite I've sent into orbit, it's all about mastering the variables. You calculate the fuel burn and you account for atmospheric drag. You predict the wear on a battery pack after 10,000 cycles. You don't leave things to chance. You don't let the universe surprise you. But love, it's the ultimate wild card. It's the one thing I couldn't model, couldn't predict, couldn't force into submission. I couldn't sit down with a whiteboard and map out a path to someone who'd see me for me, not the guy on the news, not the name on the patents, but the man who stays up too late, who doubts himself more than he admits, who dreams so big it sometimes scares him. I wanted someone who could walk into my chaos and not flinch, someone who could look at my failures and say, we'll figure it out together. But how do you engineer that? How do you write a spec for a human connection that feels like it was written in the stars? I'll be honest, it was terrifying. Not because I was afraid of failing. I've failed plenty. Rockets have exploded. Deals have collapsed. Critics have had their field day. I know how to handle failure. You analyze the telemetry, you find the weak link, you rebuild stronger. But this was different. This wasn't a rocket blowing up on a launch pad. This was a void I couldn't measure, a question I couldn't answer. What's the failure mode of a lonely heart? What's the telemetry of longing? There's no data to pull, no logs to review, no prototype to tweak. It's just you sitting in the dark, wondering why the thing you want most feels like it's light years away. I tried to logic my way through it. I told myself, work harder, build more, achieve something so big the emptiness will fill itself. I thought if I could just push the boundaries of what's possible, colonize Mars, rewire the planet's energy grid, connect every human with a signal from the sky, the ache would go away. But it didn't. The more I chased numbers, the further I drifted from the answer, the more I leaned on logic, the more I realized it was a crutch, not a cure. I was like a man trying to fix a broken spaceship with a paperclip. Logic is powerful, but it's a poor substitute for love. And the harder I tried to control the outcome, the more I felt like I was losing the one thing I couldn't afford to lose, myself. This is where it gets raw. I'm not a guy who talks about feelings easily. I'm wired to solve problems, not to sit around dissecting my emotions. But there I was, staring at the ceiling at 4 in the morning, realizing that all the equations in the world couldn't solve this one. I couldn't design a flowchart that ended with someone holding my hand when the world felt too heavy. I couldn't run a simulation to predict the probability of finding someone who'd see past the headlines, past the noise, past the armor I'd built to keep the world at bay. I was a man who'd built an empire out of steel and code, but in that moment, I felt like I was living in a house made of glass, fragile, transparent, exposed. Ladies, I know you get this. You felt the weight of trying to hold it all together. Your work, your family, your dreams, your heart. You've poured everything into building something meaningful, only to wonder if it's enough, if you're enough. You've stood in moments where the world expects you to have all the answers, to be the rock, the glue, the one who never breaks. But you've also felt the moments when you just want someone to see you, not for what you do, but for who you are. You want someone to look at you and say, I see your strength, your fire, your fears, and I'm here for all of it. That's what I was searching for, not a solution, not a fix, but a connection that could make the chaos of life feel like a shared mission. I realized something profound in those sleepless nights. The greatest journey I'd ever take wouldn't be measured in miles to Mars or gigawatts of energy produced. It would be measured in the steps I took outside the boundaries of logic into the uncharted territory of the human heart. I'd spent years believing that if something was broken, I could fix it. That's the creed of every engineer. Identify the flaw, isolate the weakness, design a better system. Rockets blew up, we rebuilt them. Factories stalled, we re-engineered the process. But love isn't a machine you can take apart and put back together. It's a mystery, a force, a frontier that demands you let go of control and trust in something bigger than yourself. That was the hardest part for me, letting go. I'm a guy who spent his life gripping the controls, calculating every turn, anticipating every variable. But love asked me to do something I'd never done before: surrender, not in defeat, but in faith. Faith that there was someone out there who could see me not as a collection of achievements or a list of failures, but as a man who was trying, who was fighting, who was hoping for something more. Faith that I didn't have to solve the universe alone. And let me tell you, for someone like me, that's scarier than any launch countdown, any investor meeting, any moment when the world is watching to see if you'll crash or soar. This is what I want you to hear. especially you women in the audience. You have a power that no equation can capture, no blueprint can define. You have the ability to see through the noise, to cut through the chaos, to find the human being behind the armor. You don't just hold space, you create it. You don't just support, you transform. When you choose to love, when you choose to show up, you're not just filling a gap in someone's life, you're rewriting the trajectory of their soul. You're the force that turns a house into a home, a dream into a mission, a moment of silence into a moment of meaning. And that's not something you can measure in horsepower or megabytes. It's something you feel, something you live, something you build with every choice you make. So as I stood there, grappling with the limits of my logic, I started to see that the answer wasn't in a formula or a plan. It was in letting go of the need to control everything and trusting that the universe, or maybe something bigger, had a design. I couldn't yet see, I didn't know it then. But that realization was the first step toward something greater than any rocket I'd ever launched. It was the first step toward a prayer, a hope, a dream that wasn't about conquering space, but about conquering the fear of being truly seen. And that, ladies, is where the real mission begins. Not in the stars, but in the heart. Stick with me, because the next part of this journey is about what happened when I stopped trying to solve love and started to believe in it instead. Here's where the story takes a turn. Not into the roar of a rocket launch or the hum of a factory floor, but into a quiet so profound it felt like the universe itself was holding its breath. I've spent my life building things, machines that defy gravity, cars that outrun the wind, networks that stitch the world together with beams of light from the sky. I've stood in control rooms watching telemetry data stream in, my heart pounding as a rocket fights to break free of Earth's pull. I've sat in meetings where billions of dollars hung in the balance, where every decision felt like a bet on the future of humanity. Those moments were intense, electric, alive, with purpose, but nothing compared to the moment I found myself alone, not in a boardroom or a factory, but in the stillness of my own soul, grappling with a longing I couldn't outsmart or outwork. It was late, the kind of late where the world feels like it's folded in on itself. The house was silent, the kind of silence that amplifies every creak, every whisper of your own thoughts. I wasn't staring at a computer screen or sketching a new design on a napkin. I was just there, sitting on the edge of my bed, hands clasped, head bowed, feeling the weight of everything I'd built and everything I hadn't. I'd spent years believing I could solve any problem, that no challenge was too big if I threw enough brain power and grit at it. But this wasn't a problem I could solve with a wrench or a line of code. This was about the ache of being human, the part of me that yearned for something no blueprint could capture, a partner, a connection, a presence that could make the chaos of my life feel like it had meaning beyond the headlines. I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I prayed, not the kind of prayer you recite out of habit or tradition, but the kind that spills out of you when you're stripped bare, when you've run out of answers, and all you have left is hope. I didn't pray for a successful launch or a $1 billion deal. I didn't pray for the next big breakthrough or the strength to outlast my critics. I prayed for her, for a woman who could see me, not the guy who builds rockets, not the name on the stock ticker, but me, the man who stays up too late chasing dreams, who laughs at stupid jokes, who carries doubts he doesn't share with the world. I prayed for someone who could walk beside me, not behind me, through the noise of ambition and the quiet of failure, someone who could look at the mess of my life, the late nights, the impossible deadlines, the weight of trying to change the world and say, I'm in, let's do this together. Oh, that prayer wasn't polished. It wasn't eloquent. It was raw, clumsy, almost desperative. It was the sound of a man who'd spent his life trying to control everything, finally admitting he couldn't control this. I'd calculated trajectories to Mars, mapped out battery efficiencies to the decimal point, predicted satellite orbits with pinpoint accuracy. But love? That was a frontier I couldn't chart. It was a mission I couldn't launch with a countdown and a checklist. It required something I wasn't used to, surrender, not surrender in the sense of giving up, but in the sense of letting go of trusting that there was a plan bigger than mine, a design I couldn't see, a force that could guide me where my logic couldn't. Let me be clear. I'm not a guy who's comfortable with intangibles. I live in a world of measurable outcomes, pounds of thrust, miles per hour, gigabytes per second. If you can't quantify it, it's hard for me to trust it. But that night, I leaned into something I couldn't measure. I leaned into faith, not the kind that's blind or naive, but the kind that says, I don't have all the answers, and that's okay. The kind that says, I'm willing to believe there's something or someone out there for me, even if I can't see the path yet. That was the scariest thing I'd ever done. Scarier than betting my entire fortune on a company everyone said would fail. Scarier than watching a rocket explode and knowing I had to rebuild from scratch. Because this wasn't about money or machines, this was about my heart, my future, my hope for a life that felt whole. I want to talk to you ladies directly because I know you understand this in a way that cuts deep. You've carried dreams of your own. Maybe it's a career you've fought for, a family you've nurtured, a vision you've held on to even when the world told you it was too big. But you've also carried the weight of wanting connection, of hoping for someone who sees you, not just for what you do, but for who you are. You know what it's like to pour your heart into something, to give everything you have, and still feel that quiet ache when the day ends and you're alone with your thoughts. The courage it takes to hope for something more, to believe that there's a place for you in someone's life where you're not just needed, but cherished. That prayer I said wasn't just for me, it was a recognition of the power you hold. Women, you are the ones who make the impossible feel possible. You're the ones who can look at a man's chaos, his dreams, his fears, his failures, and see the potential for something greater. You don't just fill a space, you create a world. When I prayed for a partner, I wasn't asking for someone to follow me or cheer from the sidelines. I was asking for someone to stand shoulder to shoulder, to challenge me when I'm wrong, to remind me of why I started this crazy journey in the first place. I was asking for someone who could take the raw material of my life, all its ambition, all its mess, and help me build something that lasts, something that matters more than any rocket or factory. That moment of prayer was a pivot point. It wasn't about giving up control, it was about redefining it. I'd spent my life thinking control meant having all the answers, but I started to see that real control is about trusting the process. Even when you can't see the outcome, it's about believing that the universe, or whatever you want to call it, has a way of working things out. For me, that meant trusting that there was a woman out there who could handle the storms of my life, who could see the man behind the mission and say, this is worth it. Not because of the headlines or the bank account, but because of the shared dream of building something bigger than ourselves. Ladies, you know this truth better than anyone. You've been the ones holding space for others, creating safety in the chaos, turning moments of doubt into moments of hope. You've been the ones who show up not with answers, but with presence. And that's what I was praying for, not a solution to a problem, but a presence that could make every problem feel surmountable. I didn't want someone to fix me. I wanted someone to fight alongside me. I didn't want someone to complete me. I wanted someone to expand me, to make me more than I could be alone. And that prayer, that act of faith, was the first step toward finding her. This is what I want you to take away. Your power isn't just in what you do, it's in who you are. You have the ability to transform lives, not by being perfect, but by being present. You have the strength to take a moment of darkness and turn it into a beacon of hope. When you choose to love, when you choose to show up, you're not just changing one person's life, you're changing the trajectory of everything that comes after. You're the engineers of connection, the architects of meaning, the dreamers who make the impossible feel within reach. That night, when I prayed, I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know if my prayer would be answered or if I'd spend the rest of my life chasing a dream that stayed out of reach. But I knew one thing. I was ready to let go of the need to control everything. I was ready to trust that there was a plan, a purpose, a person out there who could make the silence feel like home. And that act of faith, that willingness to step into the unknown, was the beginning of a journey that would redefine everything I thought I knew about success, about love, about what it means to be human. So stick with me, because the next part of this story is about what happened when that prayer started to take shape. When I met the woman who didn't just answer my hope, but expanded it beyond anything I could have imagined. This isn't just about finding love, it's about discovering that love is the mission that makes every other mission worth fighting for. Now, let's shift gears. I've taken you through the silence that shook me, the logic that failed me, and the prayer that changed me. I'd spent my life building machines to conquer the impossible, rockets that dance with the stars, cars that rewrite the rules of the road, satellites that weave a digital web across the planet. But none of that prepared me for the moment when the universe answered my prayer. Not with a thunderclap or a Hollywood montage, but with a quiet encounter that felt like the first breath after a long dive underwater. This is the part where I met her, the woman who didn't just walk into my life, but recalibrated it like a compass, finding true north in a storm. It wasn't what you'd expect. No fireworks lighting up the sky, no orchestra swelling in the background. It was ordinary, almost disarmingly. So I was used to moments of high drama countdowns to launches, boardrooms buzzing with billion-dollar stakes, factories humming with the pulse of production. But this was just two people in a room with no cameras, no headlines, no world watching. I remember the way she looked at me, not with awe, not with judgment, but with a kind of clarity that cut through every layer I'd built around myself. It was like she saw the man behind the mission, the guy who'd spent years hiding behind blueprints and balance sheets, and she didn't flinch. She didn't see a visionary or a billionaire or a failure waiting to happen. She saw me, and in that moment, something shifted inside me, like a rocket locking onto its trajectory after a shaky ascent. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I was a mess when we met. My life was a high-stakes juggling act. SpaceX was fighting to prove reusable rockets weren't a fantasy. Tesla was racing against deadlines that felt like a countdown to doom. And every day was a battle against skeptics who thought I was one bad decision away from collapse. I was used to people looking at me like I was a puzzle to solve, a stock to bet on, or a story to sell. But her, she didn't care about the noise. She didn't ask about the latest launch or the market cap. She asked about me, how I was holding up, what kept me awake at night, what made me laugh when the world wasn't watching. It was disarming, like someone had hacked through my firewall and found the human underneath. Let me set the scene. It was one of those days where everything felt like it was moving at a million miles an hour. I'd just come off a marathon of meetings, my brain fried from arguing with engineers about thrust ratios and suppliers about battery cells. I was running on fumes, coffee, adrenaline, and the stubborn belief that I could outwork any problem. I walked into a coffee shop, not expecting anything more than a quick caffeine hit. And there she was, sitting at a corner table, reading something that looked like it had nothing to do with rockets or electric cars. I don't know what made me stop. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, like she was at ease in a world that never slows down. Maybe it was the way she smiled when she caught me staring, not a polite smile, but one that said, I see you. And I'm not impressed by the headlines. Um, we started talking, and it wasn't about my work or my plans to colonize Mars. It was about the little things, the kind of music that makes you forget the world, the books that stick with you long after the last page, the moments that make you feel alive when everything else feels like chaos. I told her about a time I stayed up all night watching a meteor shower, not because I was studying orbits, but because it reminded me how small we all are. She laughed and told me about a road trip she took with no map, just a tank of gas and a playlist that felt like freedom. It was the kind of conversation that feels like it's pulling you out of orbit, grounding you in a way that no equation ever could. Ladies, this power, you've been in those moments where you connect with someone, not because of what they do, but because of who they are. You've felt the spark of seeing someone's truth, of cutting through the noise to find the signal that matters. That's what she did for me. She didn't care about the rockets or the factories or the billions. She cared about the guy who was trying to keep it all together, who was fighting to make a dent in the universe while wondering if anyone would notice if he disappeared. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just a chance encounter. This was the answer to the prayer I'd whispered in the dark, the hope I'd carried when I let go of control and trusted in something bigger. What struck me most wasn't just that she saw me, it was that she challenged me, not in the way critics do, with sharp words and sharper agendas, but in the way someone does when they believe in you more than you believe in yourself. She asked questions that made me pause, that made me rethink the way I was charging through life. Why do you push so hard? She asked one day, not accusingly, but with a curiosity that felt like a mirror. I stammered something about saving the planet, making humanity multiplanetary, the usual spiel, but she shook her head and said, no. I mean, what's it for? What's the point? If you're running so fast, you forget why you started. That hit me like a meteor strike. I'd spent years focused on the destination Mars, clean energy, global connectivity, but she was asking me about the journey, about the why behind it all. That's when I realized she wasn't just someone I could talk to, she was someone I could grow with. She wasn't here to follow me or cheer from the sidelines. She was here to walk beside me, to call me out when I was too stubborn to see my own blind spots, to remind me that the mission wasn't just about changing the world, but about living in it. I'd always thought partnership was about finding someone who'd fit into your life like a component in a machine, but she showed me it's about building something together, something that's bigger than either of you alone. It's like designing a rocket. You don't just bolt on parts and hope it flies. You integrate, you test, you refine until every piece works in harmony to reach the stars. Ladies, this is where your strength shines. And you're not just the ones who hold things together, you're the ones who make things possible. You see the potential in people even when they can't see it themselves. You take the raw material of a moment, a conversation, a glance, a quiet understanding, and turn it into something that lasts. When I met her, I wasn't looking for someone to save me. I was looking for someone to challenge me, to push me, to make me better. And that's what she did. She didn't just see me, she saw what I could be, and she wasn't afraid to hold me to it. That's the kind of power you carry. the kind that doesn't need a spotlight or a headline to change a life. I remember one evening early on when we were just starting to know each other, I was ranting about a failed test, a rocket that didn't make it, a setback that cost millions, and felt like a punch to the gut. I was pacing, my voice sharp with frustration, my mind racing with calculations of what went wrong. She listened, not interrupting, not trying to fix it, just letting me spill out the chaos. When I finally stopped, she looked at me and said, "You're not your failures. You're the guy who keeps going anyway." It was simple, but it landed like a perfectly executed landing on a drone ship. She didn't dismiss the failure or sugarcoat it. She saw it, acknowledged it, and reminded me that it didn't define me. That's when I knew this wasn't just a connection. This was a partnership, a co pilot for the mission of life. That moment changed me. It wasn't about falling in love in some romantic, starry eyed way. It was about realizing that love is a choice, a commitment, a shared journey. She wasn't here to make my life easier, she was here to make it fuller. She didn't smooth out the rough edges, she sharpened them, made me see where I could grow, where I could be more, and that's what I want you to hear. Ladies, you have the power to do that, not just for someone else, but for yourself. You're not just part of someone's story, you're the co author, the one who helps write the chapters that matter most. You don't just support, you shape, you challenge, you transform. As I stood there, getting to know her, I started to see that the greatest mission I'd ever take on wasn't about reaching Mars or rewiring the planet's energy grid. It was about building a life with someone who made every victory sweeter, every failure bearable, every moment real. She wasn't just the answer to a prayer, she was the beginning of a new equation. One I couldn't solve alone, but couldn't wait to explore together. So stick with me, because the next part of the story is about what happens when you face the storms of life with someone who doesn't just stand by you, but fights alongside you, turning chaos into strength and dreams into reality. Now we're getting to the meat of it, the part where the rubber meets the road, or in my world, where the rocket meets the launch pad. I've taken you through the silence that woke me up, the logic that let me down, the prayer that opened my heart, and the moment I met the woman who didn't just change my life, but gave it a new trajectory. But meeting her wasn't the end of the story. It wasn't like the credits rolled and we rode off into some perfect sunset. No, that's not how life works. And it's definitely not how love works. Love isn't a destination you arrive at, it's a mission you commit to, a journey through storms that test every fiber of your being. And let me tell you, the storms came and they came hard. This is about what happened when the world tried to tear us apart. And we chose to hold on, to fight together, to turn chaos into something unbreakable. Picture this. My life was a pressure cooker. SpaceX was pushing the limits of what rockets could do, with every launch feeling like a make or break moment for the dream of making humanity multiplanetary. Tesla was in a dogfight, racing to scale production, while critics circled like sharks, waiting for us to miss a deadline or run out of cash. The stakes weren't just high, they were existential. Every day was a grind, a relentless push against gravity, doubt, and the ticking clock of survival. I'd come home with my mind still spinning, numbers and failure modes dancing in my head, the weight of thousands of jobs and billions of dreams pressing down on me. And she was there, not as a bystander, not as a cheerleader, but as a partner who stepped into the storm with me, eyes wide open, ready to face the chaos head on. Let me take you to one of those nights. It was after a brutal day, one of those days where everything that could go wrong did. A rocket test had failed. not with a spectacular explosion, but with a quiet, gut-punching glitch that cost us weeks and millions. Tesla's supply chain was choking, with parts delayed and investors breathing down my neck, questioning whether we'd make payroll. I walked into the house, my shoulders heavy, my voice clipped, my mind, a tangle of stress and self-doubt. I was used to carrying that weight alone, to bottling it up and pushing through with sheer stubbornness. But she didn't let me. She saw the storm in my eyes, the way I was holding it together by a thread, and she didn't back away. She didn't try to fix it with platitudes or distract me with small talk. She sat down across from me, looked me in the eye, and said, "Talk to me. Not about the rocket, not about the factory. Just talk." Um, that moment was a lifeline. I started talking not about thrust ratios or production bottlenecks, but about the fear that maybe I wasn't enough, that maybe the world was right and I was chasing a dream too big to hold. She listened, not with pity, but with a strength that felt like steel. And then she did something I didn't expect. She challenged me. "You're not carrying this alone," she said. "You think you have to be the one to solve everything? But that's not how this works. We're in this together. If it crashes, we'll rebuild. If it fails, we'll learn. But you don't get to shut me out." It wasn't soft or gentle, it was fierce, like a co-pilot refusing to let the ship go down without a fight. And that's when I understood she wasn't just here to hold my hand, she was here to hold the line, to stand in the fire with me, to make sure we came out stronger. Ladies, the strength, you've been the ones who show up when the world feels like it's collapsing, when the people you love are drowning in their own storms. You've been the anchor, the one who doesn't run when things get hard, who doesn't flinch when the stakes are high. You've held space for others, not because it's easy, but because it's who you are. That's what she did for me. But it wasn't just about holding space, it was about sharing the burden. She didn't dissolve under the pressure of my world. She stood steady, like a launch platform in a hurricane. And she made me see that love isn't about avoiding the storm, it's about weathering it together. There was another night, one I'll never forget. We were facing a crisis that felt like it could end everything. A key investor was pulling out, threatening to tank a project we'd poured years into. The team was fraying, morale was low, and I was staring at numbers that refused to add up. I came home late, the house dark, except for a single light in the kitchen. She was there, waiting, not with accusations or demands, but with a quiet strength that felt like a reset button. I started venting about the money, the pressure, the fear that maybe this time we wouldn't make it. She didn't interrupt or try to solve it. She just listened, her presence like a signal cutting through the noise. Then she leaned forward, her voice steady, and said, "You've built things from nothing before. You'll do it again. And I'm not going anywhere." In son. Those words weren't magic. They didn't make the investor come back or the numbers balance, but they did something more powerful. They reminded me I wasn't alone. They reminded me that the mission wasn't just mine, it was ours. She wasn't waiting at the finish line, waving a flag. She was running the race with me, ready to pick me up when I stumbled, ready to push me when I hesitated. That's what partnership is, not one person carrying the load while the other watches, but two people sharing it, doubling the strength. Having the weight, let's be real, the storms didn't stop. There were days when we argued, when the stress boiled over, when the pressure made us both sharp-edged. I'd snap about a deadline. She'd call me out for losing sight of what mattered. We'd go back and forth, not because we wanted to hurt each other, but because we were both all in, both fighting for something bigger than ourselves. Those moments weren't easy, but they were real. They were proof that love isn't about perfection, it's about showing up, even when it's messy, even when it's hard. Every argument, every tense night, every moment we chose to stay and work through it instead of walking away, that's what forged us. Like steel in a furnace, the heat didn't break us, it made us stronger. Ladies, this is where you shine. You faced your own storms. Maybe it's a career that's tested your limits, a family that's demanded everything you have, or a dream that's felt just out of reach. You know what it's like to stand in the chaos and choose to stay, to fight, to build something that lasts. You're not just the ones who hold things together, you're the ones who make things grow. You take the raw material of life, its pain, its pressure, its uncertainty, and you shape it into something beautiful, something enduring. That's what she did for me. She didn't just weather the storm, she helped me navigate it. Helped me see that the goal wasn't to avoid the rain, but to learn how to dance in it. I started to see that love isn't a shield against hardship, it's a forge. It's where you're tested, refined, made stronger. Every time we faced a crisis together, whether it was a failed launch, a financial scare, or just the exhaustion of trying to keep up with a world that never slows down, we came out on the other side not just intact, but transformed. She didn't make the problems disappear. She made me better at facing them. She didn't erase the fear. She gave me a reason to push through it. And that's the power you hold, ladies. You're not just partners in someone's story, you're co pilots. Navigating the turbulence, charting the course, making sure the mission doesn't crash. One memory stands out. It was during a particularly brutal stretch when everything seemed to be falling apart at once. A production line was down, a launch was delayed, and the headlines were brutal, calling us reckless, domed, finished. I was spiraling, my mind stuck in a loop of worst case scenarios. I came home, sat at the kitchen table, papers scattered everywhere, my head in my hands. She walked over, didn't say a word, just started gathering the papers into a neat stack. Then she sat down, looked at me, and said, "You don't have to fix the world tonight. Just breathe. We'll tackle it tomorrow." It was so simple, but it was everything. It was a reminder that I didn't have to carry the universe alone, that I had someone who saw the weight and chose to share it. That's what I want you to hear. Your strength, your presence, your willingness to show up. That's what changes everything. You're not just supporting characters in someone's mission, you're the ones who make the mission possible. You're the ones who turn a house into a home, a dream into a legacy, a storm into a story of resilience. When you choose to love, when you choose to fight alongside someone, and you're not just holding their hand, you're rewriting the stars. So, as we weathered those storms together, I started to see that the greatest achievement wasn't in the rockets we launched or the cars we built. It was in the life we were building, the partnership we were forging, the love that grew stronger with every challenge. Stick with me, because the next part is about how that love redefines success, not as a number on a balance sheet or a milestone in a factory, but as a life shared, a mission made whole, a legacy that outlasts us all. Let's pivot to a new angle, one that flips the script on everything I thought I knew about what it means to win. I've spent my life chasing metrics that the world told me mattered: pounds of thrust to break Earth's grip, miles per gallon equivalent for cars that run on lightning, satellites orbiting thousands of miles above us to connect a planet that's never felt smaller. Success, for me, used to be a number. Um, how many rockets landed? How many cars rolled off the line? How many billions the market thought we were worth? I built my identity on those numbers, on the idea that if I could push the boundaries of physics and economics, I'd have proof that I was enough. But then she came into my life and she didn't just shift my perspective, she rewrote the equation entirely. This is the part where I learned that success isn't about what you stack up in a factory or a bank account. It's about what you build in the quiet moments, in the spaces where love lives, in the presence of someone who makes every victory mean something more. I want to take you to a specific moment, one that crystallized this for me. It was a day that should have felt like a triumph. We just hit a milestone that had the whole world buzzing. Maybe it was Tesla churning out thousands of cars in a single week. A goal that analysts said was a pipe dream, or maybe it was SpaceX nailing a launch that put another piece of our constellation in the sky, bringing us one step closer to wiring the world with internet from orbit. The factory floor was alive with energy. The team was high-fiving. The internet was exploding with chatter about how we'd done the impossible again. I stood in the middle of it, shaking hands, smiling for photos, playing the part of the guy who'd cracked the code. But inside, there was this hollow space, a quiet that no amount of noise could fill. I'd spent so long chasing the next milestone that I'd forgotten how to feel the weight of the moment, how to let it mean something beyond the numbers. I drove home that night, the city lights blurring past, my mind still racing with production schedules and launch timelines. I walked through the door, expecting to collapse into the silence I'd come to know too well. But there she was, waiting not with fanfare or a speech, but with a simple dinner on the table, a glass of water, and a look that said more than any headline ever could. She smiled and said, "You made it, not you did it. Not you're a genius, but you made it." It was like she was saying, "You're home. You're here. You're enough." And in that moment, something clicked. Success wasn't the thousands of cars or the satellites in the sky. It wasn't the applause or the stock price. Success was walking into a home where someone saw me, not the guy on the magazine cover, but the man who was tired, who was trying, who was human. That night changed how I saw everything. I'd spent years measuring my worth by output, how many tons of payload we delivered, how many miles we could drive on a single charge, how many people we could connect with a signal from space. But she showed me a new metric, one that didn't fit on a spreadsheet or a dashboard. It was about presence, about connection, about building a life that felt full, not because of what I'd achieved, but because of who I shared it with. She didn't care about the headlines or the market cap. She cared about the moments we carved out together, the late night talks, the quiet mornings, the times we laughed over something stupid when the world outside was screaming for my attention. Those moments weren't just nice to haves, they were the foundation of something bigger, something that made every other goal worth chasing. Ladies, this truth in your bones. You've built lives, careers, families, dreams, all while carrying the weight of expectations, yours and everyone else's. You've poured your heart into things that matter, whether it's raising kids, climbing the ladder, or chasing a vision no one else could see. But you've also known the moments when the world's applause feels empty, when you realize that what matters most isn't what you produce, but who you share it with. You've been the ones creating those spaces, homes, relationships, communities where people can come back to themselves, where they can be seen, not for what they do, but for who they are. That's what she did for me. She didn't just give me a place to land, she gave me a reason to keep flying. I started to see success through a new lens. It wasn't about accumulating more money, more recognition, more milestones. It was about connection, about building something that lasts beyond the next earnings call or launch window. I remember one evening sitting on the couch with her, the house quiet except for the hum of the world outside. We weren't talking about rockets or factories or the next big thing. We were just there together, sharing a moment that felt like it could stretch into forever. She looked at me and said, "You know, the world doesn't need another rocket as much as it needs you to be human." That hit me hard. I'd spent so long trying to be larger than life, to be the guy who could outwork gravity itself, that I'd forgotten what it meant to just be, to laugh, to rest, to let someone in. That's when I realized that love doesn't compete with ambition, it completes it. Without love, every achievement is like a rocket that launches but never lands, a car that drives but never arrives. It's motion without meaning, effort without purpose. But with love, even the smallest victories become monumental. A successful launch is great, but sharing the story of it over dinner, seeing her eyes light up with pride, that's what makes it real. A production milestone is huge, but coming home to someone who doesn't care about the numbers, only about you, that's what makes it matter. She taught me that success isn't about how high you climb, it's about who's there to share the view. Ladies, this is where your power lies. You're not just the ones who make things possible, you're the ones who make them meaningful. You take the raw material of life, its chaos, its triumphs, its quiet moments, and you weave it into something that endures. You're the ones who turn a house into a home, a goal into a legacy, a life into a story worth telling. When I looked at her, I saw more than a partner. I saw someone who could take my dreams and make them bigger, not by adding to the noise, but by grounding them in something real. She didn't just support my mission, she became part of it, shaping it, refining it, making it ours. I'll never forget one particular night. We just pulled off something big. Maybe it was a new model hitting the streets or a rocket landing that had the team in tears of joy. I came home, still buzzing with adrenaline, ready to dive into the next challenge. But she stopped me, put her hand on mine, and said, "Stay here for a minute. Just be here." It was like she was pulling me out of orbit, reminding me that the point of all this, the rockets, the cars, the dreams wasn't just to keep moving, but to have somewhere to come back to. That moment wasn't about billions or headlines. It was about us, about the life we were building, about the love that made every struggle worth it. That's the lesson I want you to carry. Success isn't what the world tells you. It's not about how many people know your name or how many zeros are in your bank account. It's about who knows your heart, who sees you when the spotlight fades, who chooses to stay when the world gets heavy. You, ladies, have the power to redefine that for everyone you touch. You're not just part of someone's story, you're the one who makes it worth telling. You're the ones who turn ambition into purpose, who make the impossible feel like it's just the beginning. So, as I started to see success through her eyes, I realized that the greatest thing I'd ever build wasn't a rocket or a car or a network in the sky. It was a life with her, a partnership that could weather any storm, a love that could outlast any milestone. Stick with me, because the next part is about taking that love and turning it into a legacy, not one written in steel or code, but in the hearts of those we love, in the lives we touch, in the future we build together. Here we are at the final leg of this journey. And I'm not going to wrap it up with a neat bow or a feel good tagline. I'm here to light a fire, to send you out of this room with a mission that's bigger than any rocket I've ever launched or any factory I've ever built. I've taken you through the silence that broke me open, the logic that couldn't hold me, the prayer that set me free, the woman who saw me, the storms we faced together, and the way she redefined what success means. But this isn't just my story, it's yours. To, especially for you women in the audience, you're not here to be spectators in the grand theater of life. You're not here to cheer from the sidelines or pick up the pieces when the world falls apart. You are the co-authors of destiny, the ones who take the raw chaos of existence and shape it into something eternal. This is your call to action, your moment to step into the power you've always carried, to recognize that your love, your strength, your vision are the forces that can rewrite the future, not just for you, but for everyone you touch. Let's get real. I've spent my life obsessed with pushing boundaries, building machines that defy gravity, cars that outrun the wind, networks that pull the world closer together. I used to think my legacy would be measured in miles traveled to Mars, in gigawatts of clean energy, in billions of people connected by a signal from the sky. But the longer I've lived, the clearer it's become. The truest legacy isn't in the medal or the code or the headlines. It's in the love you build, the lives you shape, the moments you make matter. And you, ladies, are the architects of that legacy. You're not just part of the story, you're the ones writing the chapters that will echo through generations. I want to take you to a moment that brought this home for me. It wasn't a big moment, not the kind that makes the news. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day that feels like a pause in the chaos. I was sitting on the porch, watching our kids run around the yard, their laughter cutting through the air like a signal from a distant star. She was there beside me, not saying much, just being. The world outside was still spinning, deadlines looming, launches bending, critics sharpening their pens, but in that moment, none of it mattered. What mattered was the sound of those kids, the warmth of her hand in mine, the feeling that we'd built something that no market crash or failed test could touch. That was when I understood the greatest thing I'll ever leave behind isn't a rocket or a company. It's a family, a home, a love that will outlive me, that will carry forward in the hearts of those kids and the generations after them. Ladies, you know this power better than anyone. You've been the ones building homes out of chaos, weaving love into the fabric of everyday life. You've held families together through sleepless nights and impossible odds. You've chased dreams, whether it's a career, a cause, or a vision no one else believed in, and you've done it while carrying the weight of love, of connection, of making sure the people around you feel seen. That's not just strength, that's a superpower. It's the ability to take a moment, a life, a dream, and make it mean something more. When I looked at her sitting there on that porch, I saw more than my partner. I saw the woman who'd taken my ambition and given it purpose, who'd taken my chaos and given it clarity, who'd taken my life and made it a legacy. This is what I want you to hear. You are not supporting characters. You are not the ones who stand in the background while someone else takes the spotlight. You are the co-authors of destiny, the ones who shape the story, who decide what matters, who make the impossible possible. When I prayed for a partner, I wasn't asking for someone to admire me or follow me. I was asking for someone to challenge me, to stand toe to toe with me, to remind me that the mission is bigger than my ego. And she did that. She didn't just walk beside me, she pushed me, sharpened me, made me more than I could have been alone. She wasn't the wind beneath my wings, she was the fire in the engine, the force that kept us moving forward, no matter how rough the ride. I'll never forget a conversation we had during one of our toughest seasons. Things were falling apart, supply chains were breaking, launches were delayed, and the world was writing us off. I was pacing the living room, my mind racing with worst case scenarios, my voice sharp with frustration. She didn't try to calm me down or tell me everything would be okay. She sat me down, looked me in the eye, and said, "You're not just building rockets, you're building a future. And I'm not here to watch you do it. I'm here to make sure we do it right." That was a game changer. It wasn't about her supporting my dream, it was about her claiming it as ours, about her stepping into the mission with the same fire, the same grit, the same refusal to quit. That's what you do, ladies. You don't just support, you shape, you refine, you make the mission bigger than it could ever be alone. So here's my call to you: embrace that power. Don't let the world tell you that your role is to stand in the shadows, to hold things together while someone else gets the glory. You are the ones who turn dreams into reality, who turn chaos into clarity, who turn love into legacy. When you choose to love, when you choose to commit, you're not just changing one life, you're changing the trajectory of everything that comes after. You're the ones who make a house a home, who make a goal a mission, who make a life a story worth telling. And that's not just a role, it's a revolution. I want you to think about your own mission. What's the legacy you're building? Not just in your work or your achievements, but in the lives you touch. Who are you showing up for? Not just with your time or your effort, but with your heart. Who are you challenging to be more, to dream bigger, to fight harder? Because that's where your power lies, not in what you do, but in who you are. You're the ones who can look at a person, a moment, a dream, and see the potential for something greater. You're the ones who can take a spark and turn it into a fire that burns for generations. I think about the future, about the world my kids will inherit. I want them to have clean skies, renewable energy, the chance to walk on Mars someday. But more than that, I want them to know what love looks like because they saw it in us. I want them to grow up knowing that strength isn't about how much you control, but how much you trust. That success isn't about how loud you shout, but how deeply you listen. That legacy isn't about what you leave in the headlines, but what you plant in the hearts of those you love. And that's what you're doing every day, with every choice you make to show up, to love, to fight for what matters. So, ladies, this is your moment. Step into it, own it. You're not just part of someone's story, you're the ones writing the ending. You're the ones who make the mission mean something, who make the journey worth taking, who make the future possible. Don't let anyone tell you that your love, your strength, your presence is anything less than revolutionary. Because the truth is, the greatest thing I've ever built isn't a rocket or a car or a network in the sky. It's the life we're building together, the love that holds it all together, the legacy that will outlast us all. And you're the ones who make that possible. Go out there and write your chapter, love fiercely, fight bravely, dream boldly, be the co-author of destiny, not just for yourself, but for everyone you touch. Because when you do, you're not just changing the world, you're redefining it. One heart, one home, one legacy at a time. And that's a mission worth everything.